Hello and welcome to a late edition, primetime edition of Blind Eye Live. I am your host, Hunter King, Blind Eye himself, owner and proprietor of Blind Eye Media, a small internet media outlet, whatever you want to call it. And I am excited to get into this week's slate of coverage. We've got our draft preview week going this week. AFC and NFC East today. We'll do the AFC and NFC North tomorrow. And then AFC and NFC West. And then we'll end with the AFC and NFC South. Because I wanted to save those divisions for last because my Titans are in the AFC South. So, best for last. Am I right? So we're going to get into that today. I did want to go over some news. We over the weekend, we had the sad passing of Dwayne Haskins. Whatever his career has been to this point in the NFL does not matter. Tragic loss of life. We don't know the full circumstances, or should I say, we would know the full circumstances if it wasn't for all of the morons who decided they had to be the first people to get the story out and muddy the waters, including Adam Class Act Schefter. Who cares about the fact that he struggled to catch on with Washington and Pittsburgh or whatever? The dude died. You don't need to put that kind of extra context. If you want to say former Washington and current Pittsburgh quarterback, that's fine. But people know, the people who are following you know who you're talking about. That was just, at some point it's like, do you not think before you do things? Now, I'm not here for canceling the guy. I don't think Schefter should be suspended. Obviously should apologize, what have you, instead of just deleting and re-uploading a new version of the tweet. Like, take some responsibility. Like, that was not cool in the moment. And I'm not one to get up on this stuff, and I'm not, like I said, I'm not here for canceling someone over stuff like that. But it just continues this whole, because I'm upset with a few other things, because before we get into it, I also want to talk about what's happened to Frank Vogel. I get that these reporters have jobs and a job to do whatever. Some of the stuff that's going on is just sad and pathetic. The fans don't need to know that Frank Vogel is going to get fired on Monday, on Friday or Saturday night, what have you. That's not fair to Vogel. I see all these journalists on social media, complaining about, oh yeah, blame the reporter. Yeah, blame the reporter. He's just as much to blame as whoever the front office source is. Because that front office source is giving him all this information because it benefits them in the long run. This is what a lot of people don't understand about all these articles you see about coaches and front office executives of the future and people that get a lot of mention. A lot of them are those front office sources, are those league sources, team sources. And after a while, they're the ones who end up, as long as they're pretty decent at their jobs, they a lot of times get mentioned in these articles with the real actual candidates. Because the media throws people out there they want to see. Not necessarily that teams are looking at. It's just like some of the stuff with Eric Bieniemy. Eric Bieniemy has gotten a huge push from the media. He's not as well liked among front office executives around the league, and it's proven out. They've interviewed him time and time again, and he hasn't gotten jobs because apparently he didn't vibe with people. At least those are the reports going around. And I do wonder, and I'm not saying that Eric Bieniemy has given, source information from the Chiefs. I don't know on an individual level. I do know this from a number of different podcasts I've listened to over the years of front office executives in many sports talking about, yeah, a lot of these league sources are executives. Like, especially stuff where you hear something that's kind of weird about a player or something. They're front office executives who will give that out. And there's kind of this idea that, hey, I'm scratching your back. I'm giving you content. I'm giving you stories. You know, one, keep coming to me, but sometimes this leads to people getting media gigs too. So there's this incestuous relationship between these reporters and these sources. The reporter doesn't have to report things. Like, he can choose. We see it all the time. They choose not to cover different types of news. They choose to just leave out talking about Deshaun Watson this offseason until Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson are gone. Then they finally, like, I guess now we have to talk about Deshaun in all of this. And I saw this everywhere. I mean, some people were still talking about him, but most people weren't touching him. They were centering everything on Rodgers and Watson. Rodgers and Wilson. And even there was more talk about Jimmy Garoppolo and Carson Wentz this offseason than there was about Deshaun Watson. And I don't think that was because of a lack of league chatter. The reporters made a decision on their own not to talk about it. So why does the reporter have to report that he's been told by someone within the organization that Vogel's going to get fired Monday? You know, Vogel's at a press conference. The young guys for the Lakers fought and scrapped and came back and beat the Knicks in what to me was a great testament to Vogel's ability to coach and develop players. And and they're dogging him about this report or whatever. And he just keeps saying, like, I'm going to celebrate this. And doesn't give them an answer. And he doesn't owe them one. I mean, and I've gotten on to on a subbooks about Russell Westbrook and some of the stuff he does at press conferences where he's purposefully, like, he's being disingenuous just to goof on or, in his mind, make some reporter look like an idiot. I think that's very different than I think it's different when reporters ask a genuine question to Russ, and then when reporters are asking about this rumor they're hearing or these sources talking about someone's job security. I mean, it's just to me, that's a joke. That's not news yet. That's a rumor. We have become a industry that cares more about rumors than the facts. If if you believe this source or you believe he's gone Monday, there's no need to put the story out unless you need to be first. Woj needed to report that so that he continues to be all-knowing, all-seeing Adrian Wojnarowski. I'll just be honest. I think it's toxic. I think it's really toxic. I think there is a difference between reporting on ongoing chatter and what happened to Frank Vogel this weekend. You know, I mean, that Knicks win was big for those players and for that coaching staff, considering what has happened this year. I think it was a testament to their abilities. And it gets marred. And the Lakers firing Frank Vogel for no reason. Frank Vogel's one of the best coaches in the league. He's one of the minimum 10 best coaches in the league. This season's not his fault. It's not Vogel's fault that Anthony Davis can't stay healthy. It's not his fault that LeBron missed time with injuries and can't play defense anymore. It's not his fault that the team traded for Russell Westbrook. It's also not Rob Pelinka's fault that the team traded for Russell Westbrook because they had DeMar DeRozan lined up. And LeBron said no, according to Magic Johnson. And I tend to believe Magic Johnson because he doesn't talk a bunch of just BS. Magic Johnson has been friends with Jeannie Buss forever. He has known Jeannie Buss for decades. They are really close. There's a reason he was the team president. I mean, there are also reasons he stepped down, but Rob Pelinka built that championship roster. Rob Pelinka hired or was part of hiring Frank Vogel. And at some point, you have to look at it and say, everywhere LeBron has gone, he has ran that team into the ground to the point that he had to leave. And I believe that. During his first run in Cleveland, Cleveland didn't use its assets extremely well. It's just the honest truth. But LeBron elevated those early Cavs teams. You know, they had some hiccups and stuff in Miami, and part of the reason they fell off is because they went after all these really old guys who were going to fall off in 2 years. And they traded their future, and LeBron doesn't do a good job of mentoring younger players. That started in Miami. Bosh elevated people around him. And in some ways, people could say LeBron elevated people. I mean, I just think LeBron during that time was at his best. And Dwayne Wade was still great. But I think Bosh elevated everyone on that team because of what he did, the sacrifices he made. Then LeBron goes back to Cleveland, and he pushes for them to trade for Kevin Love. I mean, and they end up getting a title out of this, but once again, he spends the entire time dogging every young player, forcing the team to trade young assets for older players instead of truly mentoring young guys. I mean, there are so many like fringe young guys who ended up on the Cavaliers whose careers were destroyed because they ended up on the same team as LeBron James. I'll use Kay Felder, who is a very undersized point guard, but was really good in college. I think he could have had a future if he, had not ended up on the Cavaliers. And LeBron just had the team get rid of him. And those were all the reports. That's the accepted canon of what happened. LeBron told the team to let go of Kay Felder because he wasn't good enough. Well, yeah, he's a rookie. He's young. Grow the talent. I mean, it got so strained that Kyrie demanded out. LeBron scapegoats everyone around him. And part of that's because of his time, that first stint in Cleveland. But at some point, like the buck has to stop with the great ones. The buck stops with them. Not LeBron. It never has. And I just think what happened to Frank Vogel sucks. But this media culture is, and what happened with Frank Vogel, same thing with this Dwayne Haskins situation. Poor guy, and we still don't know all the facts. But from what from looking at a bunch of stuff, ran out of gas on the interstate and decided instead of like calling for help or whatever, he tried to cross the interstate, got hit by a dump truck. It's just sickening to think about. And I didn't believe in the guy massively as a prospect. Like, I didn't have a first round grade on him. There are other things that and we can talk about all that. That's not what's important right now. This is a young dude who was trying to figure out life. Seemed like in Pittsburgh he was figuring a lot of the off or some of the off-field stuff out. And seems extremely well liked by his friends, like especially his Ohio State teammates. Paris Campbell had a really, kind of moving tweet about how saying, man, I wish recently I'd told you how much I loved and cared about you, because I don't get to do that now. He says, I hope you know now. And I mean, like, and honestly, I'm actually a little tearing up right now. But I mean, like, but instead we're talking about how a bunch of these media people just. But it's the news, it's the cycle. Everything, we got to cover it 24/7. We got to be the first out here. We got to have the first word. Our take needs to be the one everyone thinks about first. And we got to hear everybody's take on it. Everybody's got to have a say on it. We got to ask everyone about what the thing is of the day. And sometimes that puts you in a space where you say things that, and it puts you in a space where you do what Adam did. He didn't do that maliciously. But because of of the industry, he did something that shows callousness. Even if it's not, even though it very much wasn't intentional. And this is what, we talk about these narratives with people. Like, this is the big thing, is like narratives in sports. Like, fan bases have their own narratives. Every fan has their own narratives. And sometimes I think we just forget, like, these are people. That, whatever college athletic program, it's full of people. And we talk about this thing, this entity, sometimes in very non-human ways. And we say really callous things about people. I say very callous things about people. And it's something I need to work on. But I do think it's like, when we do remember these are people, which I try to do on this show, when I do talk about what's going on with Deshaun Watson, I can look at all the facts and all the, rumors or stuff that's been reported, court filings, and I can look at and kind of say, well, maybe I don't think that Watson's fully guilty of most of the things he's being accused of. I think it's probably a little more nuanced, and there's some other things here at play. I can also say that Deshaun Watson, the human, has a very big problem that he needs to handle. And he is not the kind of guy I want being the face of my football team. Not because I think that not because I believe all the allegations against him, but he was in that situation because he was making poor decisions anyway. So, obviously, he can't control, or he has no control over himself as a person. So, but I'm saying that from a human perspective. Like, I really hope that Deshaun Watson, because to me, he obviously needs some kind of guidance. He needs some kind of, in my opinion, he needs to mature, and he might need some help doing that. I hope he gets there as a person. But I think it's a little rich that you're going to say that you respect women, you were brought up and that's what you value, but you're going out and you're paying Instagram massage therapists to get more than a massage. Especially considering you're apparently in a dating relationship that you really care about, according to the depositions. This is my thing. You can think the guy's not guilty of the civil suits because those aren't being honest, and you can also think he's a scumbag. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive. And, That's just me. And for all his own personal faults, Baker Mayfield, I'd take Baker Mayfield's off the field stuff over Deshaun Watson's in a heartbeat. I don't think he has. It's like he doesn't have near the issues, and most of his are years in the past now. So good luck, Cleveland. With that being said, we're going to get into the draft preview now that I am 20 minutes or so into the show. I'm going to try and get out of here by 11, so we got an hour. Let me see. Where am I going to be because of this? Just my camera. Nope. There we go. Boosh. Once again, you see the screen because, I'm blind as a bat, and I, kind of need it. So I will flip over and check the chat every so often. So we're going to start with the AFC East. We'll move to the NFC East. I'm going to go through this depth chart here. This is ourlads.com. Definitely want to shout these guys out. These guys do really good work. I think their depth charts are usually the most accurate on the internet. They really care about being accurate. So, yeah, I like that size a little bit better. And they'll even go 4 and 5 deep. I mean, they've got fringe guys. So we're gonna go through the roster, and I'll kind of assess needs as we go. Because the idea here for my preview is I'm going to talk about kind of what each team has done and what positions I still think moving forward they can improve on, that they should target in the draft, and maybe some guys at the selections that they have, or in some ranges down the board. So for the Bills, and they're picking in the first round, they're picking 25th, I believe. What in the world is okay? Wide receiver, I think they're actually pretty good at the receiver position. You've got Diggs. Davis really popped in towards the end of year 2. I think going into year 3, you're really happy with him. The big Stephon Diggs extension, he's under contract till like 2027, I think, or through 2027 now. Like, he's there for the haul. Jamison Crowder, I think, was a really good signing at slot receiver if he can stay healthy. They got Jake Kumaro, who's a really solid depth player. Marquez Stevenson, who they drafted in the 6th round last year. And they re-signed Isaiah McKenzie, who also had some nice little breakout games at the end of last year. They also have Isaiah Hodgins, who they drafted in the 6th round in 2020, and Tanner Gentry. To kind of just quickly go through their receiver position, they still could draft for the future, because Davis, I think, has 2 more years on his contract. Not necessarily, or I don't necessarily believe, if he pops the way they think he could, he might end up being too expensive for them. McKenzie's on a nice contract for the next 2 years, pretty cheap. Stevenson has some return potential, slot potential, deep potential, but they could draft a receiver. I've seen a number of places have them draft a receiver in the first round, although that was before the Stephon Diggs, the big Stephon Diggs extension. And Crowder's has a pretty lengthy injury history, not really a long. I don't know about him being a long-term guy for them, but I don't know if first round's necessarily where you need to go for him. From there, so, I mean, I like their depth at the position, or I like the talent they have. And they have some athletes between Diggs, Davis, McKenzie. Kumaro, actually, pretty good athlete at the position, as well as Marquez Stevenson. He's kind of a smaller guy, shiftier guy. The offensive line for them is pretty good. Deion Dawkins, really good, or has been really good at left tackle. A lot of people thought he was a guard coming into the draft, even though he played tackle in college. They thought he was maybe a little too slow. Turns out, he's been really good at tackle. They re-signed Mitch Morse. Sorry, I'm having a little trouble breathing. Sorry, allergies have been kind of messing with me. So I'm not getting a lot of good breaths through my nose. And I need to get a regular mic and figure out kind of where my noise gate needs to be. Because I think on my last show, I was kind of, or my breathing was coming in a little too hot. Yeah, like right there. I wonder, I just really don't know how to set that, to be completely honest. I'll have to get with someone to do that. Anyway, back to this, because I don't need to spend too much time per team. We're going to go 2 hours instead of 1. I like the Robert Saffold signing. I think that was really good. Cody Ford just hasn't lived up to it as a tackle or really a guard since being drafted in the second round 2019. Which he was a guy I was a little worried about coming out. Maybe you're hoping in year 4 he can do something, but they obviously aren't betting on it. They've got Ryan Bates slotted to start at left guard. They also signed, I'm trying to look, because I'm not finding it. I need to flip my hat around. Sorry, I'm having to get so close that my hat was bumping the screen there. Once again, this is the vision I have to live with. When I'm not doing this, when I'm not streaming, I actually have some software that reads to me, so I don't necessarily have to do this, but that's really confusing when I'm on the stream. Like, trying to repeat that would be, what I'm reading, be crazy. And I still like the visuals. Spencer Brown, who they drafted last year in the 3rd round, I love him. They've got him slated to start at right tackle. They got Tommy Doyle, who they drafted in the 5th round, as kind of a swing tackle behind him. But right now I'm seeing Bobby Hart is their 4th tackle, which isn't terrible, but I think they could still add a tackle on day 3 of the draft, another developmental guy, like a depth guy. But I would like to see them maybe go after the guard position in the draft as well. But I think that's more of a day 3 thing. But they could do it. It depends. Because with their 1st round pick, if they drafted Zion Johnson or Kenyon Green, he would slot right into that left guard spot, and their offense would be sick. Or their offensive line would be really, really, really good. But I don't think it's necessarily their biggest need. We'll get to that as we go down. Tight end position, Dawson Knox is still there going into the last year of his rookie deal. O.J. Howard, they signed on a cheap 1-year, $3.5 million deal, real cheap. Tommy Sweeney, who they drafted in the 7th round in 2019, solid, like, backup tight end. They don't necessarily have to do anything at tight end, although, once again, this is a great draft to take a day 3 flyer on someone. And they have a good enough roster to where, that's really what most of what they're looking for is depth and future down the road. Quarterback, obviously, Josh Allen, who signed a big extension. They traded for Case Keenum. They've signed Matt Barkley. If Barkley's your third-string quarterback and Keenum's your backup and Josh Allen's your starter, you've got a really good quarterback room as far as I'm concerned. The running back, I'm going to be completely honest. I really like the Duke Johnson signing. I talked it up. But he's still at his best as a rotational back. They need someone who's explosive in the running game. It's not Devin Singletary. It's definitely not Zach Moss. Tywan Jones, they also, brought him over from Houston. He and Duke Johnson both have come there from Houston. Well, Duke Johnson was actually in Miami last, but his last big playing time that I remember was like with the Texans in 2020, where he looked pretty good actually when they let him play. And then Reggie Gilliam at fullback, decent fullback. But I actually think a real dynamic running back is in the cards for them. I just don't know if they're going, unless they decide to take a Breece Hall or a Kenneth Walker at the end of the first round at pick 25. I don't know if either of those guys are going to get to their second round pick. So for me, they could be one of those teams that kind of decides, kind of like the Chiefs did a couple years ago with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. The difference is that that's not what I wanted to click on. The difference here is the guy they're going to draft is going to be a much better athlete, like speed-wise, than Edwards-Helaire. My God, I have to get so close to read this stuff. And I could blow it up further, but it would mean I'm having to scroll back and forth a lot. So this is good visually for y'all, or a little better for y'all visually. Let me move my camera real quick. Oh, that's not what I want to move. Actually, don't know what I'm moving right there. That was on my face cam setup. Okay, let me quit. No. Huh. Trying to. Sorry, guys. Let me. Yeah, I'm not looking for the window capture. I'm looking for the video capture. There we go. So I'm going to move myself down over here. I think that works better for what I'm doing right now. See, ESPN, they have that area over on the left where they got all these storylines and like a ad over there and like the articles over here. Everywhere else, everything's oriented to the left. I'm like, so, okay. Back to it. We're going to motor through this, through the defense here. So, like I said, I think running back for the Bills is a big one. Hall and Walker are such good athletes. Hall had a 4.39 40. He had an amazing workout. Walker had a 4.38 40. Eventually became the official, because originally it was like a 4.46, but it was actually apparently a 4.38. So he got the opposite of a bunch of guys who were getting knocked down like 0.08 of a second. He got bumped up 0.08 of a second in speed. So then we look at their 4-3 front. Of course, they signed Von Miller this offseason. Gregory Rousseau was their first-round pick last year. They've got him slated at the other starting end spot. Their second-round picks from the last 2 years, Boogie Basham, A.J. Epinesa, backing them up. And then you have Shaq Lawson, who they have brought back to the team, because I believe he was on the team when Rex Ryan became the coach, if I'm remembering correctly. And then he's bounced to a few teams since then, but he's now back. And then they've got Mike Love, who was a undrafted free agent in 2018. He's probably more of a practice squad guy. Defensive tackle, you've got Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones slated to start. Daquan Jones, kind of their replacement for Star Latula. He's a really great run defender. Oliver hasn't super popped yet as a pass rusher like people had hoped. We'll see if they pick up his fifth-year option before that deadline hits. They brought Jordan Phillips back after a couple years away. He had a really big 9-sack season or 9.5-sack season his last year during his previous stop in Buffalo. I think with the talent around. And you also have Tim Settle. Tim Settle has been really good in his limited role as the fourth defensive tackle in Washington. 2-year, $9 million deal for him in Buffalo. That was a really good signing. I look at their defensive line, and they don't have to touch a thing, in my opinion. They could, though, if they really wanted to, they could down the board. If say Jordan Davis fell, he'd be a really good value because he's a better version of Daquan Jones. Jones isn't getting a ton of money. He's kind of like a more athletic version of Jordan Phillips, who's a massive guy, who's a great athlete. But I think that bringing in Jordan Phillips, bringing in Settle, Jones, with Oliver, you've got guys like Basham, who can very much move inside on like passing downs. Same with Rousseau. I think Epinesa could play some D-tackle, even though he's kind of a bigger, but he's still more of a finesse guy than a power guy. He's not super fast, though. I think Epinesa could play some inside, but... And then they have some street free agents, Brandon Bryant and Eli Anko. I don't think they have to do anything on their defensive line in this draft. They could, because they could go ahead, like Devontae Wyatt. I've really liked the fit of Devontae Wyatt there, but I think they brought in enough guys between Jones and Phillips and Settle, along with Oliver, who is still a player I very much believe in. I don't think they need to they don't have to touch defensive line if they don't want to. They don't have to early. Then at linebacker, you've got Edmonds and Milano, who are one of the best linebacker tandems in the league. I love Tyler Matakevich as a backup to those guys. They brought in Marquel Lee, who is pretty athletic. Tyler Dodson, whatever. I mean, I think they could add. I think linebacker is something they could add. And this is a really good linebacker class. I could see them adding a guy rounds 3 through 5. Like, there are guys like Jack Sanhorn out of Wisconsin, who I'd say is probably going to go round 5 or 6. Or, I'm trying to remember the name of the guy from the linebacker from Kansas. I think he's extremely good. Some people have him like undrafted. Like just outside of, I think there's like 265 picks or whatever in this year's draft. I think a lot of places I've seen places that have him like in the 270s. Like kind of in a range from like, and I've seen some people have him in their, Gil Brandt has him in his top 100 guy I'm thinking of. So, there are guys down the board here. My position of biggest need for them is cornerback. Yes, you've got Tre'Davious White. And you've done a pretty good job of developing guys like Taron Johnson. You really like Dane Jackson, you drafted in the 7th round in 2020, who's kind of, he was kind of their next Levi Wallace kind of guy who they developed, who just got signed by Pittsburgh. And they re-signed Ciaran Neal to a second contract, but I think they need more upside. And White's coming off an injury. I really think that, depending on how the board falls, I think they have to draft corner in the first 2 rounds. based on their roster. So for the Bills, like I said, this team has one of the best rosters in the league. If I'm rating their needs, to me, corner and running back are your top two needs. But you can choose to address, and really it's explosiveness at running back. And there is a lot of speedy running backs down the board in this draft. Guys like Rachaad White, who at the very least is going to be a really good receiving back. But I'm looking at guys like Ty Chandler, Pierre Strong Jr., Isaiah Pacheco. I mess his name up every time. And then I look at it, I'm like, or I hear someone else say, I'm like, oh, that's how you pronounce it. I think, or is it Pacheco? Isaiah Pacheco. Out of, and I said Maryland, it's Rutgers. Those are some guys later down the board. You maybe are praying that Walker or Hall somehow fall to your second round pick. And then I would say interior line and wide receiver are kind of in your next bracket. And then behind that, maybe tight end and linebacker depth. Those are kind of your tiered needs for this team. Like, just depth everywhere. Like, this is a team that really, if they just wanted to, just best player available. If that's the way they want to run their draft, they could literally just forget about need. Because they've done such a good job of developing players anyway. Trust that you're developing the guys that you've selected, and you're just doing what you've done with guys before, and just go best player available. So, kind of my favorites for like that first round spot for them, if they're going corner, I think Andrew Booth, as good as he is and as athletic as I believe he is, he didn't do any athletic testing. This is a guy who could very well be on the board at 25. Kaiir Elam is a name. I think a lot of people have him more in the early to mid-second round. I think he has the tools, and for the Bills system, I think Elam is a really good fit across from Tre'Davious White. Just get physical with that Z receiver. Physical press. They like to run a lot of zone, which Elam's pretty good in man, but I think in quarters, I think Elam's a good fit. Because some people, he's kind of stiff. Like he's got high hips, which in a system where he's more running vertically and just taking the outside away, kind of as a high-end number 2 corner, I think Elam could fit really well in this defense. Or go super upside, Zion McCollum or Tariq Woolen, the two most athletic corners in this draft. Based on the combine numbers. But I'm seeing Woolen's kind of falling down. Zion McCollum, it would shock me if Woolen or McCollum, because of their tools, ended up in the first round. And honestly, I think I'm leaning that McCollum is the better player right now. He's played corner longer, and he really dominated. So, if they're targeting corner, those are some names in the first 2 rounds. I kind of named some guys at running back. If we're looking down the board further for some of and I'll say Devontae Wyatt is a name if they do go receiver in the first round. Jahan Dotson, a lot of Stephon Diggs in his game. Christian Watson is a guy. He could go in the first round. He could be available with their second round pick. Love for him to end up in a Titans uniform. But Christian Watson is a high upside name who you want to talk about a quarterback who can maximize the talent of some of the freak athletes in this class at receiver. Josh Allen's the guy. Because Watson's one of those players. It's going to be hard for a quarterback to throw if they throw a decent ball, for him to not be able to run under it. He has that kind of long, explosive speed. He's got incredible leaping ability. A Jameson Williams, if he slides because of injury, I think as we get closer to the draft, and I'm seeing him already rising in mock drafts, I think Jameson Williams is going to be gone by this point now. Because he was wide receiver 1. Before the ACL tear, he was wide receiver 1. He should still be wide receiver 1. So, Jahan Dotson, Christian Watson are some names there, kind of early. Later down the board, maybe they want to go for an explosive kind of slot guy, speed and shake. Calvin Austin, who seems like some of the hype is cooled on him, probably because of kind of like Tutu Atwell last year, although Austin's way better in my opinion. And he's more explosive. But Austin's a guy late second in the third round. Wan'Dale Robinson out of Kentucky would be a really good fit. If they wanted like a new Cole Beasley, Kyle Phillips of UCLA is a guy that they could get probably on day 3. And if you wanted Christian Watson light, Isaiah Weston out of Northern Iowa. Not quite as tall, but still like 6'2.5", 6'3", in the 210s, put up crazy testing numbers, great numbers in the 40 and in the vertical broad jump, really good number on the bench, especially for a receiver. Like, he's strong, he's tough. Alec Pierce out of Cincinnati, who could go in the second or third round, depending on who you ask. 4.4 or faster, 40-plus inch vertical, great hands. He was Desmond Ritter's favorite target at Cincinnati. So, and if we're talking linebacker down the board, I mentioned the Jack Sanhorn. Chad Muma. Although, for me, Muma doesn't get out of the second round, this linebacker class, there's so many guys. Some guys have gotten hurt, or like Damone Clark has kind of fallen. He's a guy that might even go on day 3 now, that the Bills could get, who would be an awesome like third linebacker. Damone Clark out of LSU. So, yeah. So, that's the Bills. I'm going to try and be quicker with some of the teams beyond that. I don't know what some of these ads are for. Like, my goodness. Let's see. So, next we're going to Miami. So, obviously, this offseason has been all about Tua Tagovailoa and getting Tua what he needs to be an elite quarterback. Trading for Tyreek Hill. This now means, though, that they don't have a pick until the compensatory selections of the third round. I think their first pick is like at 104. But you look at this roster: Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, Cedric Wilson, who they brought in. They re-signed Preston Williams to a cheapo deal to be kind of a big-bodied perimeter rotation receiver. They brought in Trent Sherfield. Who was with Mike McDaniels in San Francisco. He's quick. I think he's got real potential out of the slot. They have some other guys on the roster who, like Cody Core, before like a preseason injury, he had some like real hype a few years ago. And then they've got Lynn Bowden Jr., who they traded for, that the Raiders drafted and then traded, I think before the season even started, his rookie year, who's kind of a gadget guy who I think Mike McDaniels would be able to use like a cheapo version of Deebo Samuel. Not to say he would be that good, And he would be behind Waddle and Hill, who they're going to use like that. But Bowden's a great athlete with a lot of skills. You look at the offensive line, they brought in Teron Armstead, Connor Williams. Michael Dieter has developed into a league average center, which is really good. Because of signing Armstead, they're now able to kick Robert Hunt into right guard, which Hunt was a guy I really liked coming out of I think it was UL Lafayette in 2020. But I thought fit better as a guard unless in a specific kind of more power-oriented scheme like maybe the Ravens offense. Like he could have played tackle, but I think he fits best just anywhere as a guard. He is a nasty run blocker. Liam Eichenberg then moves to right tackle, who they drafted last year in the second round, who I really liked. I thought he could be a first rounder. Austin Jackson, you kind of hate to hear it because you spent a first round pick on him in 2020. He's now your swing tackle. And maybe he beats out Eichenberg for a tackle spot. Maybe he ends up as a guard too, because they have him as the backup left tackle and left guard. But you've got a really, really high-end swing lineman with upside in Jackson, who was really young when he was drafted. He could still get way better. Wouldn't be the first time that happened. Simon Kinley has started a lot at guard. You move him into a backup guard, that's really nice. Adam Pankey now becomes your fourth tackle, which fits him a lot better. He'll probably be battling for a roster spot, though. With Greg Little, who they traded for. Little was a guy who was believed to have a lot of upside. It just really hasn't panned out. Some of it's been because of injuries. And they also spent a 7th-round pick on Lamell Coleman last year. If they were to draft offensive line, it would be an interior guy, but I don't think they need to now. Unless they think there's a guy on day 3 with some upside that they could develop into something, particularly more on the interior, because I would be investing in developing Eichenberg and Jackson still at tackle. At tight end, you got Mike Gesicki back on the franchise tag. They'll eventually, I think, get him signed to a long-term deal. Durham Smythe was re-signed to a 1-year contract to continue being their second tight end, or battle it out with Adam Shaheen, who they traded for from Chicago, and Hunter Long, who they drafted last year. They're probably really hoping that Hunter Long steps up as kind of their top inline tight end, who they drafted in the 3rd round last year. But they're good at tight end. They don't need to. That is a position they don't need to invest in. Of course, they brought in Teddy Bridgewater to be Tua Tagovailoa's backup and push him, I believe, as well. They also signed Chris Streveler, who's a really high. I think he's actually a really high upside developmental quarterback, who I believe played in the Canadian Football League briefly. At running back, they've really upgraded that position, bringing in the ever-underrated Chase Edmonds from Arizona. They signed Raheem Mostert, who knows this offensive system. They're both upgrades over Myles Gaskin, Salvian Ahmed, and Jared Dokes. And then they brought in Alec Ingold from the Raiders, who's a really, really good fullback, who's going to be really solid for this or for the team. I will say there is a guy who would really be great for their scheme in this draft. There's a couple guys, but the guy that I'm really thinking of is I'm going to butcher his name. It's like Ogonkwo. I'd need his name in front of me. Out of Maryland. Guy can play tight end or fullback, but he's got great hands. He's a great blocker. He's a great pass protector. This guy, there's tape of him at Maryland just one-on-one. Like, their blocking scheme, they have him just one-on-one with the edge rusher. Sometimes the top edge rusher for the other team. And he just mirrors him perfectly and walls him off. And it's like, when you've got a 250-pound like tight end able to do that, that's incredible. But he can also play fullback. He had like a 4.52, 4.53 40, fastest among the tight end position at the combine. And he was awesome at the Shrine Bowl. Looked great. For the defense here, their front four, you got Emmanuel Agba, who they just re-signed to a big contract. He's been really good for them. And he'll play kind of like a 3-4. Like, they play a very kind of versatile defense. I think that's going to continue with the new coaching staff. So he can play 3-4 defensive end. Like, he can play 5 technique. He can kick in on passing downs and be a pass rush tackle. He can play the edge in a 4-3. Agba's really, really versatile. Raekwon Davis and Christian Wilkins have been really good picks for them. Adam Butler is a solid depth guy. John Jenkins, solid depth along the defensive line. Zach Sealer. I mean, they've got some really solid, and Deshaun Hall even. They could draft more interior guys. I don't think they need to. I think they still need to focus on the edge, where you've got Andrew Van Ginkel. He's solid. Jalen Phillips, you're hoping pops more in year 2. Brennan Scarlett was a really nice value signing last year that I think they re-signed to another contract this year. Who's a good rotational edge, but they need more depth on the edge for sure. Because, I mean, that's 3 guys, and Darius Hodge isn't really a guy. So they need, I think that's what they need to, they've got to target that position. But I mean, they're going to be hoping for guys to fall that far. But a guy who I think is being really overlooked in this draft, Sam Williams out of Ole Miss, really great athlete. I really like his, I like his motor a lot. He was great at the Shrine Bowl, earned getting a call to the Senior Bowl because of how good he was at the Shrine Bowl. He's a guy who I think could be on the board, would be perfect to throw into their edge rotation. Landon Roberts and Jerome Baker are a really nice starting linebacker combo. Sam Ugevoen and Duke Riley, solid backups for them. But they could still target a middle linebacker on day 3. And then corner, they've got arguably the best corner tandem in the league, Xavier Howard, Byron Jones. Nick Needham's a really great slot. You've got Noah Igbenogany, who can play outsider slot, who they drafted in the first round 2020. Keon Croson's a really nice depth corner. Javaris Davis is a really physically talented depth corner as well. At Quincy Wilson, who can play corner or safety, is on this depth chart as well. They could target corner, but they don't need to. And I'll say this, at safety, Javon Holland was awesome last year. And Holland plays some corner too. He plays all over the defense. Brandon Jones, a really nice second safety. Eric Rowe, who came from New England, another versatile, all over the place safety. Clayton Fayadalum, I always butcher his name, is a solid depth safety, special teamer. Elijah Campbell's a depth guy that I really like. I don't know. I feel like their secondary is actually pretty good. They really need to focus on, I think, their edge positions, and then I would say depth at receiver and interior offensive line. are kind of their big. Like, I mean, I really think they need to just continue to focus on the edge of this defense. But otherwise, this is a really good roster. And they could stand still, in my opinion, to draft a running back on day 3. Because Mostert's only on a 1-year contract, and he's older than you think. Chase Edmonds is nice, but he's always been kind of a part of a backfield pairing, or like a rotation. And we already know that Gaskin, Ahmed, and Dokes, like, I mean, the Dolphins have had one of the worst running back rooms in the league for a couple years now. So running back, I'd say you still probably take a shot at running back at some point on day 3. Because there are some really explosive guys. And maybe, considering you have Mostert and Edmonds, like, and you've got Gaskin. Gaskin's a decent receiver out of the backfield. Edmonds is a pretty solid receiver out of the backfield. Maybe get like a real power-oriented guy like Dameon Pierce. Or you like Edmonds and Mostert as kind of your main, like, toters, but you get a guy like Rachaad White who you think has upside in that regard, but is arguably the best receiving back in this class. I'd still go with James Cook for that, but James Cook's going to be gone, I think, before they're willing to take a running back. But lucky for them, I think, well, edge rusher is just really deep in this class. Interior offensive line is really deep. So I think they're in luck. And linebacker. Interior linebacker. Those would be kind of my 3 needs I would target for them. Like, they could go for receiver depth, but I think they've got a decent, like, 5-man group of, well, I mean, Hill's awesome. Waddle looked awesome in year 1. Cedric Wilson's a really good tertiary receiver. Like, he's a really good complementary third receiver. We saw that last year in Dallas. And then Preston Williams has had some real flashes when he's been healthy in Miami. And Trent Sherfield has a lot of upside. They don't necessarily have to focus on that on the receiver position. So, let's go to the Patriots. Close that. All right. So, their wide receiver position, they traded for Devontae Parker. They've got Kendrick Bourne, who's solid. Jacoby Myers has been solid. They've got some solid guys. Nelson Aguilar has had, flashes. And N'Keal Harry's been a disappointment. They signed Ty Montgomery. But they don't, and they don't draft receivers well. But this might be the year that they go big and swing for a first-round receiver in a really, really, really good receiver class. Don't think it's happening, though. I think they're going to draft lower down the board. And I think that's one of the reasons they traded for Devontae Parker. They think he can be that number 1. And there were times in Miami where he was. But New England usually throws numbers at that position in recent years. So, offensive line, they've got some changes that have been made, but Isaiah Wynn has locked down the left tackle spot. They moved Mike Onwenu into left guard or into guard where he's better, but he can be a solid tackle, but he's a really, really good guard. David Andrews is still there at center. They brought back James Ferentz, who they believe can step into Shaq Mason's position. At the very least, that's the way our lads sees it, or at least has him. And they brought back Trent Brown last year in a trade, and they've re-signed him. So he's their right tackle. I think interior line could very well be the position they pick. I'd love to see Zion Johnson. Or I say I'd love to see Zion Johnson in the Titans uniform. Like, there's a bunch of guys I'd love to see. But Johnson would be great because of his athleticism and strength. Like, he has everything. Kenyon Green would look good here. I think Kenyon Green would actually be really, really perfect for the Patriots. Down the board, they could target guys like Dylan Parham, Zach Tom, who's extremely versatile, and the Patriots, above everything else, covet versatility. Tom could literally play all 5 spots on the line. Tight end, they have no need to go after tight ends. Hunter Henry, Johnny Smith, who they signed last year, 2020 third-round picks, Dalton Keene and Devin Asiasi are there. They're not touching that position probably. Quarterback, you drafted Mac Jones last year. That's not a need. Brian Hoyer is your backup. Jarrett Stidham, also there. Still as a backup. And then your running back position, you love your running back position because you've done a good job drafting. Damian Harris, Ramondre Stevenson. You've brought back James White. J.J. Taylor's still here. You've got Ozigbo. Like, they like their running back position. That doesn't mean they won't draft a day 3 running back. They love doing it. They love targeting running backs rounds 3 through 5. So don't, bet against them just potentially doing it again, even though it doesn't necessarily appear to be a need. Defensive line, Dietrich Wise, Devon Gocho, who they signed away from Miami last year to play nose. That was a great signing. Lawrence Guy has developed amazingly in New England. They've got Henry Anderson. They drafted Christian Barmore last year, and he looked good. Daniel Ukuela. Not that Bill Murray. And Byron Cowart, who they drafted in the 5th round 2019. This is not necessarily a position they have to target. But I say they could go after another nose tackle, like a big beefy guy at some point. But I think they've got a pretty good rotation, pretty solid depth along the D-line. Because Barmore is strong enough for sure to play nose. Guy can knock in and play nose, so can Wise. But I would say targeting a guy like Noah Ellis on day 3 or Neil Farrell would be a good idea for them. On the edges, you've got Matthew Judon, which Guy plays kind of like, he plays kind of an edge, but it's more of like kind of like your run-oriented 4-3 kind of D lineman, and then Judon's really your kind of edge rusher. They've got Josh Uche, who they drafted in the 2nd round 2020, who they think the world of. Kind of looking here. Ronnie Perkins, who they drafted in the 3rd round last year. I still think they could throw another edge out there. They don't necessarily need to if they believe Uche and Perkins are developing nicely. Henry Anderson can play some edge, but more of a 4-3 edge, not really that kind of. They have such a weird hybrid style. Like, you see Anthony Jennings is listed as a middle linebacker, but he played a lot of outside linebacker at Bama. He was a 3rd round pick in 2020. They brought in Raekwon McMillan, who's kind of a solid rotational linebacker. Juwan Bentley. They could still bring back Dante Hightower. They traded for Mack Wilson. I think middle linebacker is a position of need, even though they signed Jelani Tavai, who I still believe in as a prospect. Cameron McGrone is a big thumping middle linebacker that they drafted in the 5th round last year, who has promise. They love, I'll say, there's several guys in this draft who just could fit. Like, Devin Lloyd would fit. Just about any linebacker would fit in New England because they'd fit them. But Leo Chanel out of Wisconsin screams New England. Some people have even been throwing him up in consideration for the first round. I think New England can get him in the second round. And some people have him grade even, like some people, this linebacker class, there's so many guys really close together. They're not all going to get drafted in the range they should probably get drafted in. I think someone's going to fall. Chanel is big, athletic. He's like a supercharged version of Dante Hightower in a way. Like, because he's got that same size, but his athletic testing numbers are ridiculous for his size. He just screams New England. So he's a day 2 guy I would target if I was New England. When it comes to corner, they brought back Malcolm Butler. They still have Jalen Mills and Jonathan Jones. They brought in Terrence Mitchell. They still have Joanne Williams that they drafted in the second round in 2019. They have Justin Bethel, who's such a good special teamer, and Sean Wade that they traded for from Baltimore, who was a 5th or 6th round pick, who I thought was I think they got him in the 6th round, and I was like, what? I had a 3rd round grade on him. I think he was I thought he could be a great slot corner. When it comes to the safety position, New England's Devin McCourty's back again, so they got a great rangy free safety. Adrian Phillips has been awesome there. Kyle Duggar plays some linebacker. He plays some slot defender. He's all over the place. They've got Jabril Peppers now, who also can do a lot of those same things. They drafted Joshua Bledsoe in the 6th round last year, I believe out of Missouri. He's got some upside. They've got Cody Davis, another really good, solid special teams type guy out of Jacksonville. Their safety position's really good. They could draft for the future, but I don't think they need to. I think they need to target corner for sure. But with their round 1 pick, they could go anywhere. And I would say if it's me, they need to go receiver or interior offensive line. Now, if Trevor Penning were on the board, they could go after Penning and start him off at guard and get him ready to eventually replace Trent Brown at right tackle. But I don't think Penning is going to be there. Because I think his range is between the Ravens and the Chargers. I think he goes, and he could go to any of those teams. Like, he could even go to the Eagles, but I think 14 through 18, or 14 through 19, he's either going to go to the Ravens, he's going to go at one of the Saints picks at 16 and 19, or he's going to go to the Chargers at 17. I just don't see Penning slipping further than that. But he'd be really nice in New England. But I'm saying they need to take a shot at Zion Johnson or Kenyon Green, or even Tyler Linderbaum. If they decide, they don't want to pay David Andrews his next contract, he'd be a really solid player. If they're looking further down the board and they decide not to do that in the first round, there's tons of guys down the board. You've got guys like Chris Paul from Tulsa, who's an athletic marvel, who's probably going to go on day 3. There's a guard, I believe he played for Southern, and I'm trying to remember his name. I've seen a number of people talking about him. There's a number of just all over the place in this draft, like FCS, and guys from HBCUs, historically black colleges, who are going to make noise in the league or have a lot of opportunity to, I believe it's, I think it's Jacoby Durant out of South Carolina State. That guy was arguably the best player on the field in their game against Clemson this year. And I don't say that lightly. I think he could be an elite slot corner, and he has a lot of Jair Alexander in him. So, and he'd be, to me, Durant has New England Patriots written all over him. I think Zion McCollum could be a freakier version of, like, when you look at his tape, he's got some Stephon Gilmore to his game. So those are some guys there at some different places. I think for the way, or for what New England values in running backs, once again, Rashard White, I think could very much be a James White replacement. I know I've used his name a lot out of Arizona State. But Dameon Pierce has a lot of Damian Harris to him. But you've already got Harris and Stevenson. If you're looking at running back, I think you're looking at more of a receiving type guy. James Cook could be an interesting option for them, but I don't know if they would draft a running back. Well, I think Cook's going to go third round, and he could fall to the fourth round. Ty Chandler would be interesting because he would give him a crazy speed, and he's a good receiver out of the backfield. For some front seven, or from like pass rushing, they could go for a pass rusher. I don't think they do. You've got Judon, you've drafted Uche and Perkins. I don't think you're going to draft one in the first 3 rounds. They could, though. A guy who would fit their style, which Leo Chanel, with his abilities, he could play inside and outside. Channing Tindall would be a really interesting fit in New England because he can play inside and outside. He's got great athletic traits. Quay Walker's another guy who'd be really good for New England. I think they're going to double dip at the linebacker position, like outside and inside. And I wouldn't count out like Andrew Booth or if Trent McDuffie were to fall for them to go to New England. Let's see, how am I doing on time? Oh my goodness, it's already almost 11. Let's see. So we're going to New York Jets. Man, maybe I should just do this 2 weeks and just do a division per show. Because I've got plenty of time to the draft. Let's just do 1 division per show. I think 2 divisions is too much. So we'll finish out tonight with the Jets, and I'll let y'all go. So for the Jets, I kind of like their offseason. Or really, I've kind of liked their last 2 off seasons. Corey Davis continued his production that he's, or this kind of living up to to his draft stock a little more since, or the last couple years. He fell just short of 1,000 yards with the Titans as their number 2 receiver behind A.J. Brown, and also sharing targets with Jonnu Smith in a very run-heavy offense. Corey Davis had similar production this past year to his 2020 season in Tennessee. Elijah Moore had flashes as a rookie. I think he's a great breakout candidate for year 2. Braxton Berrios has finally come into his own as a slot receiver, which when I saw New England draft him, I'm like, well, there's the next Wes Welker, Julian Edelman. It just so happens he had to go to the Jets before he did that. And he's been a really good return man, too, which also not necessarily a shock. Denzel Mims, their 2020 second-round pick, hasn't really it's just not come together for him yet. I don't think they should give up on him. I've seen a lot of talk that they should draft a receiver in the first round, and I'm not necessarily convinced they need to. But it also depends on who they draft. The issue is, like, after their top three, like I said, Denzel Mims hasn't hit yet. He's got high upside, but it's just been a minute. And I'm kind of looking at the rest of their roster, and DJ Montgomery, Jeff Smith, who cares? Terry Black, same. Rodney Adams. Lawrence Cager's a big-bodied target who has something that he's not necessarily super athletic, but I mean, you just don't teach 6'5". But he's not super athletic. He's very much kind of a possession type guy, like box out type guy, and he's not as good as like a Mike Williams because he's not nowhere near as athletic. I would say I do get the arguments for a guy, and I could see like a Drake London being a really good pick here, but you could also go with Garrett Wilson, who a lot of people have as the number one receiver right now, or a Jamison Williams, because both of those guys are going to give you speed and number one receiver abilities, but I think you have some of that in Corey Davis and Elijah Moore. I know Moore is is undersized, but I think bet against Elijah Moore at your peril because he's extremely good and extremely driven. I'm convinced that Mekhi Becton is a franchise left tackle, and he would have proved it last year if he didn't have that really big injury. I think he's going to lock down the left tackle spot. Elijah Vera Tucker has locked down a starting line spot, which wasn't a shock last year. They brought back they've still got Connor McGovern at center. That's solid. They brought in Laken Tomlinson at the other guard spot. That improved their offensive line. George Fant has proven to be a solid right tackle. You've got Achuma Adoga, who you drafted in the third round 2019 as a swing tackle. You've got Connor McDermott, who can play as a swing tackle or guard. Greg Van Roten is a nice interior line depth. They re-signed Dan Feeney to a contract. They've still got Greg Sinnett under contract. Ross Piersbacher is another notable name here. They could target offensive line, but I really think if you're targeting offensive line, it's to improve over George Fant. Because, like, your guard spots are solid. You've got Elijah Vera Tucker. You've got Laken Tomlinson. Maybe you decide you want to upgrade on Connor McGovern. But I think between him, Van Roten, and Feeney, you've got three guys who can play center. And if you're drafting, I'd love to see them take, if they're going to go offensive line, they need to take, I think, Evan Neal. But Fant is solid there. So I don't think offensive line is really a pressing need for the team. Their tight end position, they transformed through free agency. C.J. Uzomah, Tyler Conklin, that is a great one, too. You've still got Trevon Wesco, who's kind of a H-back, fullback type guy. And then Kenny Yeboah. You got Dylan, but I don't really care about Dylan that much. Let's see, quarterback, you've got Zach Wilson. You brought back Joe Flacco and Mike White. Your quarterback room's set. Everything's about making things better for Zach Wilson, and that's the biggest argument for adding another high-profile receiver, high-end receiver. And I really think if they're going to go after someone, I really feel like Drake London's the guy because he's so much different than everyone else because of his size. And his ability to separate underneath. I don't see deep speed I don't see a lot of long speed for him, but he's got short area quickness and light feet for a bigger, like for a 6'5" receiver. But to me, you've got more. You've got Berrios, who can kind of play in that slot role. You've got Corey Davis, who's kind of a physical guy. The other argument is Garrett Wilson, who he's taller than Moore. And Berrios. He's not as tall and long as Davis or Mims or necessarily like strong, but he's got great speed. I think he and Olave would give them a little more juice. And their speed's really good. But Davis and Moore aren't lacking in that regard either. So, I don't know. They don't have to go receiver early, but I get why they might. And they should go receiver because they still need more than 3 guys. And Mims hasn't popped yet, so it's not a given that he's going to. But you need more than 4 quality receivers on your roster anyway these days, even with their type of their style of offense. I think they need to go after running back. I like Michael Carter, but I think he needs to be part of a backfield, rotation. Tevin Coleman is solid. A lot of people like Ty Johnson. I think he's fine, whatever. But I'm not in love with their running back room. And I think they could use someone or a home run hitter type guy in their backfield. Like a Kenneth Walker in round 2. Or further down the board, if you want to get into day 3, I've already listed their names a bunch, but like Pierre Strong, Ty Chandler, Isaiah Pacheco. Damian Pierce would give them more of a power style back. Mention his name again. Let's see. On defense, hopefully this year Carl Lawson doesn't get injured in preseason, because that's going to help more than anything, him being healthy. You brought in Jacob Martin, who was really good for Houston last year. I think that's him being part of your pass rush rotation's really nice. You have 2020 third-round pick Jabari Zuniga that you're still trying to develop. But I think they need to take a big-time swing at end, and I think they have to do it at 4 or 10, and I think they probably should do it at 4, because more and more I'm seeing like mocks with Jermaine Johnson inside the top 8 picks. And he's the guy they would take at 10. They do like John Franklin Myers, though. But I still see him as more of a rotational guy. You got Quinnen Williams and Sheldon Rankins on the interior and they re-signed Nathan Shepard to a contract. They've brought in Solomon Thomas. They drafted Jonathan Marshall in the 6th round last year. They've got plenty of guys on the interior. I don't think they need to worry about that unless they want to draft some kind of big monstrosity like a Neil Farrell or Noah Ellison on day 3. Noah Ellis on day 3, not Ellison. At linebacker, of course, you love having C.J. Mosley. They really like Quincy Williams. They're really high on him. I think they could draft a linebacker, though, because I'm not in love with Jamian Sherwood, who they drafted in the 5th round last year, or Deshaun Phillips. Hamza Nasir-Ladin was one of those guys people talked about, this long safety who could probably play some linebacker and be a matchup guy against tight ends. I just didn't. I got the length, but he just isn't really explosive, and I think there's a reason he's showing down here. There's a reason he ended up falling to the 6th round. There's a reason he's showing as like 3rd string on the depth chart, or really fifth in the pecking order or sixth even at linebacker for the Jets right now. Of course, he can always prove me wrong, you know. Their secondary, DJ Reed, I think was a really good signing. They like their other Michael Carter, who they drafted in the 5th round last year. They drafted Michael Carter's in back-to-back rounds, the 4th and 5th. Bryce Hall, who was a steal in the 5th round of 2020 coming off a big injury. That guy was a first-round guy before the injury, and he has played he's a legit starter. I would love to see them still draft an elite or another elite corner prospect, because that would allow them to kind of, one, ease that younger corner in, but Hall can play inside or out, Reed can play inside or out, and you need multiple corners. And after those first 3 guys, Brandon Eccles has, some tools, but he was a 6th-round pick last year. Their 5th-round pick last year, Jason Pinnock, I didn't have a draftable grade on him. They drafted him in the 5th round. Of course, just because I didn't have a draftable grade on him doesn't mean he can't amount to anything. And doesn't mean that I want him to not amount to anything. Let's see. They've got a bunch of safeties on the roster. I'm not worried about the guys too far down. Their starters, Jordan Whitehead, Austin Davis. I think they're solid at safety. They brought in LaMarcus Joyner, who can play slot and safety. I like Will Parks as a depth guy. They could draft a guy that they think has real star potential, but they think Austin Davis, when they drafted him, they thought he had star potential. And, he's going to year 3 with a starting gig. I wouldn't put it past him to really pop this year. If I'm looking at the Jets, though, when it comes to needs, obviously pass rusher's number 1. And they're in a prime position to get one of the top guys at 4. And potentially, depending on how the board falls, they could still be in the position to get, to maybe get Jermaine Johnson at 10. I think he'll be the 4th one drafted. But I just don't see a scenario where all or one of Hutchinson's not getting to 4, let alone to 10. Walker could, but Walker's been steadily rising. Some people even have him going number 1 now. A lot of people have him going number 2. You've got Kayvon Thibodeau, who I still think it's hard pressed to see him sliding to 10 because of how many of these teams could use an edge rusher. And these guys are they're too talented to fall, in my opinion, that 10th pick. So I think they need to go pass rusher at 4. And this is a deep edge rusher class. They could get impact guys potentially in the 2nd or 3rd round from a trait standpoint. They could end up with a Boye Mafe, a Arnold Ebiketie at the top of the 2nd round. Trying to think of a couple of the other guys in that range. Potentially. But for me, I think edge rusher is number 1. I think your second biggest need is really just getting high impact guys somewhere. Whether that's star talent. Just draft it wherever you can get it. For me, I think the ideal for them is to get one of Walker or Thibodeau or Johnson even at 4. I think Johnson's got or has as much upside as any of the top edge rush guys. He's got amazing physical tools, and he's got more pass rush development for sure than Trayvon Walker at this point. I would argue maybe even than Thibodeau. And he toyed with Ike Ekwonu last year, who, some people have as the number one tackle over Evan Neal now. So, but they've got to get a pass rusher, and I think they've got to do it at 4. They've got to take the highest graded one of those guys, I think, on their board at 4. And then at 10, you decide, do you want a receiver depending on who's on the board? Which I've seen Jameson Williams now going to the Jets at 10, and that I think is a really good, you're swinging for the fences. He gives you something that none of those other guys give you, and that is, Moore and Davis have really, really great, they have great speed. Jameson Williams is one of the fastest players I've ever seen. And he's got good length at 6'2". And I think he could fit really well with Zach Wilson based on his tape. The way he played with Bryce Young this year, I think he unlocks Zach Wilson. But I could see a Drake London going there too. I could see the reason why you would go for a Garrett Wilson. But I'd argue I'd go after a star corner who might be on the board there. If one of Gardner or Stingley's on the board, I could see going after them. I could see them even drafting Kyle Hamilton. Although I kind of think everybody's kind of slid him out of their top 10 at this point. It seems like I'm seeing a lot of him to Washington at 11. So to recap kind of my thoughts on the East real quick, if we're just going off kind of basic needs, I'm just going to kind of list off. For the Bills, I think corner is your biggest need. And I would say other than that, I think it's just best player available. Like, I could see where you would go into your offensive line for the Bills. I could see wide receiver down the board for the Bills. I could see that in any of the first 3 rounds, really. Like a impact, like development receiver. And then depth at corner. But I think the defensive line, they've got plenty of depth. Because I think they go 9 deep between defensive and defensive tackle. And some of those guys can kind of play both. So, although you might argue they need still could use an injection of speed on the edge. But I think you could get that later down the board with a guy like Sam Williams or an Amari Barno out of Virginia Tech who ran a 4.3640, who some people now have have day 3. I look at the tools and I'm like, I don't know how this guy gets out of day 2. I don't think he's a day 1 prospect. I don't think he's a round 1 prospect. And I still think, round 2, I don't know if he's a top 50 guy. Tools-wise, he's one of the toolsiest players ever, and he's got some great production tackle for loss-wise, but he's really raw when it comes to pass rushing skill. But the Bills, I think, could get it, or would be a great development spot for him. So, like I said, corner, interior line, wide receiver. Oh, should I say corner and running back? I forgot about for the Bills. An explosive, fast, home run hitting running back is your number 2 need with corner or after corner. And then it's, in my opinion, interior line, wide receiver depth, linebacker depth. For the Dolphins, I think it's, once again, adding to your edge rush. But, you're picking in the compensatory picks in the 3rd round. You're really just drafting for depth. I think you're taking home run swings, or you're going with guys that you think can be solid in your system, which, like I said, pass rush, interior line depth, wide receiver depth. I think they could go after a running back. But the Dolphins actually have a pretty solid roster. And I mentioned Williams and Barno could be some guys if Nick Benito somehow found a way to fall that far, but I don't think that's happening. For the Patriots, wide receiver is obviously a need. I don't know if that's going first round, though. Interior line, like right guard, if you could get an impact player there, that would be awesome. But they might really believe in James Ferentz, so. But you need more than 5 linemen every season, and you need to develop someone. So. But you can get that throughout this draft. And I think it got down the board. Guys like Luke Godeke, Zach Tom, really versatile guys, I think could be outstanding fits. Tyler Smith's a guy. He's raw, but the ability to play guard and potentially develop into tackle, I think could be something the Patriots really like. And just continuing to build out depth in their front seven too. And like at linebacker, getting like an heir to Dante Hightower's throne, and I'm just Leo Chanel's just screaming. But there's so many linebackers in this class, and they all could fit the Patriots in different ways. Nakobe Dean would be really fun for their pass, or as like kind of their pass down linebacker. Or Devin Lloyd. Devin Lloyd's a guy who can do it all. There's a lot of those guys. Like Troy Anderson's a freak athlete. Chad Moon would be awesome in New England. And then for the Jets, it's really just star power everywhere. You need to just be drafting best player available. But there is a good framework here. And edge is definitely the big thing. Especially in a division where you've got to deal with Josh Allen. Mac Jones looked pretty good in year one. It looks like New England has their quarterback of the future, and you're going to have to get after Tua because these weapons are awesome in Miami, and it seems like everyone's up in there, and Miami's really up their game on the offensive line finally. But I would say edge rusher, and then really it's just getting, taking home run swings everywhere. Because, I think the Jets, I don't think their roster's terrible. I just think they could do. I'd really say, edge, we're seeing a lot of wide receiver. I'm going to say edge, I'm going to say corner, and then I'm going to say linebacker and wide receiver kind of fighting for that third spot there for me. But they've got plenty of picks to roll with. So, Jets fans, and Joe Douglas, I think, has done a really good job of drafting in his time as GM. So, with that being said, that's the show for tonight. I thank you for tuning in. This is kind of a later show. I kind of like this time slot instead of doing it during the day. So we'll see if I end up coming back to that. But this has been Blind Eye Live for Monday, April 11th. So what we're going to do moving forward, I've made this decision during the show. We are going to run 2 weeks of NFL Draft Preview. We're only going to do one division a day. 2 divisions is going to be too much for all of us. So tune in tomorrow for NFL Draft Preview Week 1, Day 2, where we cover the NFC East. With that being said, I will catch y'all later. Y'all get some sleep tonight, and I'll see y'all tomorrow whenever I decide to stream. Follow me on Twitter at HunterK13 for stream updates. And I need to get put a graphic up. I need to get a graphic to put over on the right side and replace that Tennessee Vols logo. Go Vols, VFL. But I'm trying to look and see what my Instagram account name is. What is my handle on here? That's bad when you can't remember your account name. Oh, it's Hunter King 1313 on Instagram. I might eventually make a Blind Eye Media accounts on both, but right now, at Hunter K13 on Twitter, at Hunter King 1313 on Instagram. I keep telling people that I'm going to start doing short videos on Instagram, but I haven't yet because I hate social media. Well, you wouldn't know that by how much time I sometimes spend on Twitter, but anyway, y'all have a great rest of y'all's evening, and I'll catch y'all